And joining me now is Democratic Congressman from New York, Dan Goldman. He knows a little something about this topic. He was the lead counsel during the first impeachment of then-President Trump. So, Congressman, I'll pick up there. Republicans have been investigating Biden and the idea that his son's businesses are connected to him for months now, years, arguably. Does anything change today once this inquiry is formalized?
Well, it certainly is a formal step where every single Republican who votes for this is endorsing the idea of impeaching Joe Biden. And that's why you have to look at what they have developed over the last 12 months. It is not for lack of evidence, Garrett. They have hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, dozens of hours of witness testimony from numerous government witnesses. Multiple executive branch agencies under the administration have turned over documents. They have plenty of materials. They just don't have any evidence connecting Joe Biden to anything that his son was doing. And it doesn't change now because there's really nothing that material that they haven't gotten. They just don't have the evidence. And if they wanted more, they had Hunter Biden this morning ready to give them more evidence and testimony, and they refused to take it. So it is a little rich and ironic for them to be claiming that they need to open up a formal impeachment inquiry to get more evidence when they rejected evidence just this morning from the central witness in the case.
To be fair, in 2019, you guys made everybody appear for a private deposition before you had any public hearing. So that was the standard in 2019. I want to ask you about that impeachment as it relates to this one, too. And maybe this predates your involvement with the process or in terms of where you were in the decision making. But what was the bar for Democrats when you decided to bring the articles of impeachment against Donald Trump the first time? Do you think there's a threshold that Republicans need to meet to move this from inquiry to some further step?
Absolutely. And you know, you'll hear misinformation and gaslighting from the Republicans. But the reality is that we brought in 17 government witnesses, all of whom had firsthand knowledge of Ukraine, of Trump's dealings with Ukraine, of Rudy Giuliani in Ukraine. And we demonstrated pretty convincingly, even to Senate Republicans who voted to acquit, that we proved the case that Donald Trump abused the power of his office in order to benefit his election and his re-election campaign. And that is an abuse of power. Here, I don't even know what the allegations are. When you ask Chairman Comer to identify one specific piece of evidence, the only thing he comes up with is Burisma, which dates back to that 2019 impeachment because that was the investigation that Trump wanted Zelensky to do and extorted him about. But that has been debunked over and over and over again. And in fact, the removal of that prosecutor general was bad for Hunter Biden and Burisma.
Yeah,
so
we already had
there's
that
nothing here. And there's just absolutely no theory of the case here that I can identify that has any basis in any evidence. There are a lot of accusations, there are a lot of allegations, and there are a lot of strong words for Hunter Biden, but there's no evidence to support an impeachment of the President of the United States, which is Joe Biden, not Hunter Biden.
This is shaping up to be the third impeachment inquiry in 5 years. Are you worried that this is going to become the new normal in politics?
I'm very worried. I absolutely. This is a gross abuse of the constitutional power of the impeachment clause. You know, in the 116th Congress, during the Ukraine impeachment, the Speaker resisted calls for impeachment for a very long time until the abuse of power related to Ukraine emerged as such a clear-cut abuse of power. But the Democrats did not go forward to impeach Trump based on obstruction of justice that was overwhelmingly clear in the Mueller report. And so the Democrats were very careful about what merited impeachment. The Republicans are doing this for political retribution at Donald Trump's direction to even the score and give him something to talk about in the election. And even Representative Troy Niels admitted that today, that this is all about Trump in 2024. That is an abuse of congressional authority, and that is really, really unbecoming and improper.
For the sake of argument, let's just accept that as true for this conversation, the idea that this is done at Donald Trump's behest or his willingness to bully the Republican conference into starting this inquiry. Does Congress need to make it harder to start down this process of impeachment, given how severe the consequences are, how divisive it is for the country? Do we need to reconsider how easy it is to start an impeachment inquiry or to take a political one all the way to the finish line?
Well, I think what ultimately is going to happen is that the initial impeachment in the House of Representatives is not going to carry the weight that it should. But impeachment, because of how trials work in the Senate and the need for 2/3 to convict, is now rendered almost useless, because it's impossible to imagine a scenario where any president is convicted in the Senate by 2/3, given the partisanship that we see over there. So on the one hand, actually getting impeached in the House becomes too easy, and on the other hand, getting convicted in the Senate is too hard, and so it really loses its efficacy as a check and as a point of accountability against the President of the United States.
Speaker McCarthy rolled out this inquiry in September, but didn't have the votes to formalize the inquiry. Speaker Johnson is doing so now. Did the facts change in that time, or did the politics change in that time?
None of the facts changed, Garrett, and you're just seeing a more and more desperate Republican majority trying to drum up some facts to support their specious allegations. And you have them misleadingly telling the American people that Joe Biden received money from his brother, when in truth it was the repayment of a loan, or that Joe Biden paid for Hunter Biden, gave money to Hunter Biden, or vice versa, when it relates to car payments. There's nothing there. No evidence has changed, and none since that first public and only public hearing, when Jonathan Turley, the Republican star witness, acknowledged and stated in the first 5 minutes that there is insufficient evidence for impeachment right now. There's no more evidence now. And the irony here is that they're claiming that we need an inquiry because of stonewalling by the administration. The only thing they point to is a letter from the White House counsel's office related to a request for the former White House counsel to testify about the classified documents, which has nothing to do with this investigation, and 2 low-level Department of Justice career officials who never testify before Congress and whose supervisors and superiors have already testified, those who make the decisions. The rest of what they're saying has already been turned over, including 75,000 pages from the National Archives dating back to then Vice President Biden's tenure. So there's nothing even that they claim they need that they haven't gotten. They have gotten all of the materials that they need. They just don't have evidence, and that's what the problem is.
Congressman Dan Goldman, we will see where this all goes. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.